Shall we get on to our main topic then, Rob?
I think so, because I've been wanting to rip into this one all day. When I was making my final notes, I was thinking, I can't wait to talk to Dave about this, because I'll say up front, I thought of a ton of candidates, and I cut back, and even when I said to you, I've got this many, I even cut back from that many. And when I looked at the list, I thought, there are some obvious ones not on this list, but I think our readers bring some of them up, and I'm hoping Dave brings some of them up as well.
Yeah, so I think what we're looking at is actors or actresses who have been cast in the story for their name, or for the prestige, or for the impact on the viewer, either to get the viewer to come and watch, like, hey, boys and girls, we've got Kylie Minogue in an episode tonight, come and watch our Christmas special, or because you're going to tune in and watch and go, oh my goodness, that's that person. I'm really excited that they're in here.
That's right. And before we go on, because that's a case of either stunt casting, or what are we going to call the good version? Celebrity
casting, yep.
Mm-hmm. What do we call it, Dave, when you can sell an episode to someone and say, oh, look, such and such an actor is in this, but at the time they filmed it, they weren't actually the famous actor that you're sort of selling? I think of, say, Sally Sparrow in Blink is played by Kari Mulligan, but at the time, Kari wasn't the Kari Mulligan of today, married to the lead singer of Mumford & Sons and starred in The Great Gatsby and Suffragette and things like that. She was just Kari Mulligan. She'd do anything on TV.
Yeah, well, Andrew Garfield would be a wonderful example of that. I mean, he went on from being an obscure British actor to suddenly playing Spider-Man.
Exactly. Or Ian Glenn. He's been in about 50 episodes of Game of Thrones now as Sir Jorah Mormont. But at the time he filmed Doctor Who, where he was Father Octavian in The Time of Angels, he hadn't stepped foot on the Game of Thrones set. But now you can say to someone, hey, watch Time of Angels. It's got Ian Glenn in it. It's got Sir Jorah Mormont in it. And again, Andrew Garfield, as you say, or Kari Mulligan, whatever. What do we call that, Dave?
Maybe post hoc celebrity casting.
Indeed. I haven't actually jotted any of those down, but I was thinking of that sort of scenario. I thought, there's sort of a third scenario here too.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, sometimes these work really well. Sometimes they don't. And I think when they don't, they don't in a big scale. Like, it really just stands out that they haven't. Something else I want to highlight as well, of course, is how you define celebrity. Because for us in Australia, it's not always the same as for those in the UK. Mm. Now, a classic example of this drawn from the McCoy era would, of course, have been Nicholas Parsons in The Curse of Fenric. Now, for the British, Nicholas Parsons was a household name. For us, he was, at most, a name that gets brought up in the goodies a lot.
Yes.
We'd never seen Nicholas Parsons on TV.
No, not at all. I guess by being fans, we'd hear about it through Doctor Who magazine. We'd hear about them making a big thing over him. And, of course, we'd know him through the goodies, as you say. But otherwise, no, he wasn't a household name here.
And Frank Skinner, I think, is a good example from the modern series where I know, listening to UK podcasts, they still, 2 years ago, waxed lyrically about, isn't it wonderful that Frank Skinner was in our series? And isn't he amazing? And I wish he'd do more. And, look, I've seen him in maybe a couple of episodes of Have I Got News for You? But that's about the most I've seen him in, and I reckon that's more than most Australians have. For most Australians, and probably Americans as well, Frank Skinner was just a guy,
Yeah, he's just this guy,
I'm glad you got that reference.
Thank you. Yeah, look, for me, I knew a bit more about Frank Skinner because I used to like an alternate comedy duo called Baddiel and Newman back in the early 90s, Rob Newman and David Baddiel. And they split up, and then later David Baddiel teamed up with Frank Skinner, and they did TV shows, some of them sort of football-based, others just more comedy-based. So I sort of had a feel for Frank Skinner. But yeah, the average Australian, no idea who he is.
Yeah, so there are a few of the parameters as we explore. Shall we maybe nominate an example of good and bad from each of us, and then we can dive into what our listeners thought?
Yeah, absolutely. Who wants to go first?
Look, well, I'll make a start, because I'm going to go with probably the first one that I really noticed in the new series.
Yeah.
And that's Richard Wilson.
Snap!
Oh, there you go. Dr. Constantine in The Empty Child.
It's at the top of my list.
There you go. I can remember vividly not knowing that he was in it, and suddenly, oh my God, there's Richard Wilson. And because the series was still new and I was still judging what this new Doctor Who was about, I thought this actually worked really well because it did give it credibility. I really did feel, well, if Richard Wilson's in this is a real show.
How did this happen? How did it start? In that bog drop, there was just one victim.
Dead.
At first, his injuries were truly dreadful. By the following morning, every doctor and nurse who had treated him, who had touched him, had those exact same injuries. By the morning after that, every patient in the same ward, the exact same injuries. Within a week, the entire hospital.
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about Richard Wilson, think of One Foot in the Grave. He did about 10 years on that show as Victor Meldrew, so incredibly well known. However, not to be confused with Clive Swift, who I confused him with originally, who was Richard in Keeping Up Appearances for about 5 years, around the same time they were making One Foot in the Grave. So they're sort of contemporaries of each other. And he was in Revelation of the Daleks. And when I first saw The Empty Child, I thought, oh, it's the guy from Revelation of the Daleks. Then I realised later, oh no, they're two different guys. That's Richard Wilson.
Oh, well, it's interesting that we both had that one. What was your second, Rob?
In the good category?
In the good category, yeah.
Okay, my second on the list is Derek Jacobi as Professor Yana in Utopia.
Snap!
Oh.
Where did you get it?
I was found with it.
What do you mean?
An orphan in the storm. I was a naked child found on the coast of the Silver Devastation. Abandoned with only this.
Have you ever opened it?
Why would I? It's broken.
How do you know it's broken if you've never opened it?
Because, frankly, who didn't want more of that, It was absolutely celebrity casting, but of the good kind.
It absolutely was, because not only did it bring a whole lot of gravitas to that episode, not only was it a genuine, wow, Derek Jacobi's in Doctor Who. Wow.
Yeah.
But he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant, both as the Professor and then, my God, as the Master, he was even better.
Yeah. And as I say, who didn't want more of that? So I couldn't go past, mentioning him and saying it's definitely on the good side of the ledger.
And dare I say from the start, maybe this is a theme that we might want to sort of see if it holds true as we go through. Both Richard Wilson and Derek Jacobi are actors who've earned their celebrity the hard way by doing really difficult pieces consistently well over decades and decades. And therefore they are good actors and they can do well with material.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, we don't normally snap with each other on these things.
No.
So I'm really surprised
That's really uncanny. Do you want to go first and give us just one example of one that didn't work out?
Yes. I'm going to be a bad Australian and say Kylie Minogue as Astrid in Voyage of the Damned.
Stop me falling.
Okay, I was tempted, but I didn't, and I'll hear your explanation, then tell you why I didn't.
Let's be honest, she's only there because she's Kylie, and it's a Christmas episode, and it's just... Ugh. The part could have been played by anyone. It's absolutely stunt casting. It's RTD wrapping himself in JNT's Hawaiian shirt and just saying, Kylie, come on down. It's horrible.
And I think you also left off the real reason there, which is just that Russell T Davies wanted to meet her.
Is that right?
I suspect so. Either meet her or work with her if he'd met her before. I think it was just a personal, you know what? I'm the showrunner now. I can cast whoever I want. I want to work with Kylie.
Yeah.
I was very tempted. I didn't put her on the list in the end, though, because I didn't think she actually was awful. I thought she was perfunctory, but not awful. And I thought, had it been a normal season episode, I probably would have, but it was just okay enough to get away with it in a Christmas special. Although, I have to say, the biggest celebrity for me in that, well, actually, I wouldn't even have a third. You've got Jeffrey Palmer.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Palmer.
Yeah.
And you got Russell Tovey.
Yeah, true. Very true.
And I was probably more interested to see those than I was to see Kylie. But look, yeah, I'm not going to say it's a wrong call, Rob, but I was perhaps just more generous than you.
Well, we talk about how people are perceived in different countries, and I think the UK has this crazy fascination with Kylie that Australians just maybe don't share. She has fans here, of course, but the UK just seems so fascinated by her, whereas we're not.
Oh, yeah, every episode of Men Behaving Badly would usually end with them sitting on the couch drinking lager and talking about Kylie.
She's just not that interesting, guys. Trust us.
But yeah, you're right. That is a very interesting cultural difference.
And what did you have for a bad, Dave?
I'm going to be really obvious and just go for the first one that came into my head when we were doing this, and that's Maisie Williams as a Shielder in The Girl Who Died.
Surgeon, scientist, inventor, composer. It's a fantastic CV.
You should try my journals. I read them myself now and then. Drink pomace wine. Have a little me time.
You don't seem the nostalgic type.
It's not nostalgia. It's curiosity.
This is one of the ones I was hoping you'd bring up because she's not on my list, but absolutely. I just thought, no, I don't want her in the show, and there she was, and then she kept coming back.
The problem for me is twofold. Firstly, because I haven't really watched the Game of Thrones, I've tried, I've just never gone into it. It wasn't a celebrity for me. It wasn't like, oh, well, wow, they've got Maisie Williams. It was just, look, everyone's excited about this casting. I get it's a celebrity, but I don't care who she is. And then, frankly, she was terrible. As our friend Doc Hume from the Diddly Dumb podcast said, look, yes, she did play 3 different characters there. Oak, Mahogany and Teak.
Spot on, Doc.
Yeah. So that was one that, for me, I thought it was a very deliberate attempt to try and get into the Game of Thrones market and to walk in their shadow. It was obviously done for that reason, I think, and it just failed.
Yeah, and I think the average Game of Thrones fan watching those 3 stories would just be like, what the hell's happening here? What's she doing? Why is she like this? And I don't think they would have liked it anyway, so it just seems a bit pointless.
If you're using a celebrity casting to get their fans in, you've got to give their fans something to make it worth their while. And I don't think those episodes did.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, shall we kick off with an email first before we get into all the tweets we got?
Yeah, absolutely. Who's it from?
This is from friend of the show and sometimes host, Mike Solko.
Oh, g'day, Mike.
Yeah, g'day, Mike. He says, hello, my friends. As it would be all too easy to come up with a laundry list, I figure it easiest to list off one guest who worked well and one who was dreadful from each New Who era. From the RTD era, Mike says the poor is Simon Pegg in The Long Game. What a waste of a cult celebrity to play an utterly generic villain. It was a boring character in a dreadful story. Your thoughts, Dave?
I see what Mike is saying. I think that it worked only because Pegg elevated a boring character to being at least interesting, but I agree they could have done so much more with someone like Simon Pegg.
Yeah, I remember thinking it was quite a waste because I adored him and stuff like Spaced, and I thought he's in Doctor Who, fantastic, and I just hated the story and hated his character and just thought, yeah, that's a waste. A great example from the RTD era, Catherine Tate. Mike says, I was sceptical during the lead-up to The Runaway Bride, as it turned out she put in a fun performance that led to her being brought back as the best companion of those first 4 years.
I'm going to disagree with you, Mike.
Ooh.
I had no idea before she was cast who Catherine Tate was. So for me, she was just this loud, overacting person with an annoying accent. And I never quite got over that first impression. She did slowly grow on me, and Season 4 especially has really grown on me quite well, but there's a brashness to her performance that I believe is common to all her performances. Certainly when she turned up in the last couple of seasons of The Office, she was very similar. There's a brashness that just never quite sits well for me. And I think if you know her and love her, you will enjoy seeing more of her in Doctor Who. I think that if you're not a fan of hers, it is quite jarring. I think it really is a Vegemite choice, that one.
Yeah, I've got to say again, I knew of her because I follow a lot of UK comedy, so I knew who she was, and I wasn't too impressed with her in The Runaway Bride, but I did really like her when she came back as a full-time companion. So I'm sort of with you there and disagreeing with Mike, but I do like her when she comes back. So
fair enough.
Mike goes on to say, during the Moffat era, the poor does Cyberbrig count? I would actually go with Maisie Williams. While her first episode was strong, I found Lady Me to be smug and obnoxious. So there's a snap for you, Dave.
It is, although I think he's been a little bit too generous saying that she was playing smug and obnoxious. That's giving her far too much credit, I think.
The great from the Moff era, according to Mike, is Bill Nighy in Vincent and the Doctor, a small poignant role that was played beautifully.
Snap.
Really? Cool.
Yeah, this was actually number one on my list, not in terms of chronology, but in terms of intensity, more than any other piece of celebrity casting in New Doctor Who, when suddenly he turned around and there was Bill Nye. Bloody Bill Nye was in Doctor Who. I was just entranced. I just thought, this is so wonderful to have this guy in there. And it's only a small part, but I agree with Mike. It was just so lovely and it was so perfect. And in what remains my favourite episode of the Matt Smith era, I just think that was it was what John Cleese in City of Death was.
Yeah, well said. Mike goes on to say, looking forward to hearing what others think, and should this message be in time, vote yes.
Well, thank you, Mike. The message is in time. There is still time if you're in Australia to vote yes in the same-sex marriage survey.
And you're on the roll, of course.
Yeah, well, that's right. Look, in all seriousness, if you are voting yes and you haven't posted your ballot yet, I absolutely encourage you to do so. I've been spending a lot of my time over the last 3 or 4 weeks working on this campaign, and I think a lot of Doctor Who fans, and certainly all of the Australian podcasts, are very much in the yes camp on this one, Rob.
Absolutely. I was happy to take a photo of my ballot, of course not including the barcode because that would be bad, but just showing the box ticked yes. Very happy to be supporting the cause, and hopefully it gets up.
Yeah, so thank you for the support. It's good to know that this campaign's reached all the way to California.
Yeah, that's very cool. Let's move on with what people have tweeted at us. We can rattle through these because we've got quite a few here. Michael Seeley at MP Seeley says, Frank Skinner in that train one. Him, an actor? Leave it out. Sounds like Michael doesn't particularly like Frank Skinner.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to know what his experience of Frank Skinner was before Doctor Who. Whether he was coming in with those impressions of Frank Skinner beforehand. It sounds like he was. And I understand that if you're familiar with someone as basically being a comedian, a presenter, that sort of thing, it is sometimes very hard to take them seriously in a dramatic role. And that's the problem a lot of people had with Beryl Reid. It wasn't that coming to her cold, you couldn't say that was a good performance. It's, you just can't ever get out of your head, that's Beryl Reid.
Yeah, true. Very true.
So the next one we have is from David Clark, tweeting at David Clark with an E, 14. He says, Lee Evans was brilliant. Malcolm Taylor in Planet of the Dead. So that was, of course, the unit scientific advisor. That's a really interesting one, and I think this is one of those controversial Beryl Reid ones. Some people love him, and clearly David Clark did, and that's interesting. For me, I could never get out of my mind that this was the guy from There's Something About Mary.
Is that right?
Yeah, like his performance in There's Something About Mary was just so brilliant, but so, burning deep into the mind, that I actually could never take that away and watch him seriously, which is really unfortunate for the actor. Like, it really is what typecasting is about.
Yeah.
But I couldn't make it work. I wanted to, but yeah, his past work was just so strong for me. How did you find Lee Evans?
Look, I didn't really have much background on him, so to me he could have just been, an amusing actor with a Welsh accent sort of thing. So I just really like that scene where it's like, oh, I'm talking to the doctor, and, Tennant sort of rolling his eyes. Yes, it's me. It was just a funny sort of scene that, the former unit scientific advisor was talking to the current one who'd read all his files and stuff and was obviously in awe of him. I just thought that was really fun.
Yeah, and this is an example of where the actor hasn't given a bad performance. It's just the baggage they've brought in the audience's mind has undermined that performance, and they can't get away from that. I'm not knocking Lee Evans on this occasion. I'm just saying the baggage was too big for me.
Yeah, and look, David Lancaster, who tweets at Duvid, this is a good case in point. He has said, Lee Evans' Planet of the Dead and Roger Lloyd Pack Rise of the Cybermen, dire. So there's someone who doesn't like Lee Evans.
And it's actually a snap from me as well. I had Roger Lloyd Pack on my list of big mistakes.
Oh, really?
I think he's entirely unsuited to that role. And frankly, I don't think he knows what he's doing in that role.
Still, it's not the only country in the world. There's always New Germany.
This is the homeland. My birthplace. You may leave.
I think it's actually a poor performance from a celebrity who can give very good performances. I'm not a Roger Lloyd Pack hater. I thought he was perfect in The Vicar of Dibley, for example.
Yeah.
But I just thought he was totally out of tone and sync with that story and didn't give a performance that matched anything going on around him at all.
Yeah, well, I wasn't getting along well with that story anyway, like parallel universe Cyberman invented by this guy. Oh, no, this isn't right at all.
Oh, it wasn't an awful story, but no, I didn't enjoy that story much as well. It had a lot of flaws.
And then people saying, this is based on Spare Parts. I'm saying it bloody well is not. You know, you might have the guy's name in the credits saying it's based on Spare Parts, but it is nothing like Spare Parts. Don't besmirch its name.
Yeah, so again, I think Roger Lloyd Pack is definitely an example for me of poor casting, poor celebrity stunt casting. I have to really say that. And clearly David Lancaster agrees with us.
Now, David Lancaster also sent in one on behalf of his dad, and he said, my dad says Anne Widdecombe when she was backing Harold Saxon. Now, I had to do some research on this, Dave, because I knew Anne Widdecombe was a UK politician.
She was?
But apparently, in 2008, there was some sort of mock commercial where she was endorsing Harold Saxon for Prime Minister. It must have been some kind of jokey thing. Maybe it was an online thing. I tried to find... I found an image of it, but I couldn't find the actual video.
There's a small segment of it, I think, in the episode itself.
Is that right? I must have forgotten that.
I think so. I've certainly seen it. No, Anne Widdecombe was a junior minister during the John Major government. She became a senior frontbencher when they were in opposition. Famously described the future leader of the party, Michael Howard, as having something of the night about him, which was a wonderful line that really finished his career in many ways. Even though he went on for many years, but he never got away from that.
It was kind of a doesn't she look tired moment, perhaps.
It was a bit. It was a bit. Anne Widdecombe never really amounted to much. I think she was all hat and no cowboy, frankly.
Right.
So another nomination we have here from Jeff Waddle, tweeting at JeffWaddle68. He's going to nominate James Corden. Do you reckon this will be for good or bad, Rob?
Well, I'm going to say snap here, but I'm curious to know whether it's good or bad because I know what side I fall on.
Well, Jeff has said about James Corden, and I'm quoting here, I'm reading this off the screen, these are not my words, as entertaining as chlamydia and just as irritating. So annoying, and he came back like chlamydia. What the hell? So I think that's a thumbs down from Jeff on James Corden.
Yeah, look, it is from Jeff, but Jeff, and I know Jeff, we're mates and we talk on Facebook all the time, but I thought he was pretty good casting. You know, he'd been huge in Gavin and Stacey, so, you know, he was well known. He's even huger now, so it's an example of the Kari Mulligan effect and the Andrew Garfield effect. You can point to these episodes now and say, hey, look, it's James Corden in Doctor Who. But I thought he was really good because whatever you think of the stories, or even whatever you think of Craig, the character he's playing, I think Corden nails him. Corden plays what that kind of person is like. And for that reason, I thought he did a really good job.
You can have this back and all. What have I done? For a start, talking to a cat. Lots of people talk to cats. And everybody loves you, and you're better at football than me, and my job, and now Sophie's all, oh, monkeys. And then there's that. It's art. A statement on modern society. Ooh, ain't modern society awful?
I really liked him in The Lodger. I thought that he was perfectly suited for that character in The Lodger. I thought he struggled with the material in Closing Time. Now, whether that's a case of he put in a poor performance or the script was quite poor and he couldn't elevate it, I'm not sure. But I definitely thought that his return appearance was much weaker than his first one.
Okay, well, that's fair. Thank you, Jeff, for that.
But sorry, can I also add, though, if you were somebody who was a casual television watcher and you thought, oh, James Corden is in this episode of Doctor Who, I might check this out, that probably wasn't a bad one for you to check out. If you were a Gavin and Stacey fan, for example, and then watched The Lodger, okay, it's not the same, but there might be enough similarity or enough tonal similarity to make a casual viewer go, oh, this is worth watching.
Yeah, bonkers guy turns up in his life, does cool things, annoys him greatly. You know, it's very funny. All right. Moving on. This is a fun one because it's a couple of tweets from Rob Kelly. G'day, Rob. And you actually joined in with these tweets, Dave. So I'll sort of play both of you here. Rob Kelly says there are many examples of stunt casting in the new series, although stunt implies and has a negative connotation, but they weren't all bad. Catherine Tate is casting that worked, but Sir Ian McKellen's casting as the Great Intelligence's voice was pure stunt. You jump in, Dave, and say, wait, Ian McKellen played the Great Intelligence? Rob Kelly says, you see what I mean? Why cast someone of that calibre if no one knows they're in it? It's stunt casting that no one knows about. Odd. Yeah, that's a really odd one. I genuinely had no idea that Ian McKellen had played the Great Intelligence in Doctor Who. I had no idea. When he brought this up, I remembered that it had happened and that I had read that it was him, but I had completely forgotten about it, and if it had come up in pub trivia, or if someone had mentioned Ian McKellen and wouldn't he be good in Doctor Who, I probably would have been saying, yeah, it'd be great to see him in Doctor Who one day. I would not have remembered at all until Rob reminded us here.
And, let's be honest here, Ian McKellen would be a contender for the biggest name ever in Doctor Who. Bill Nye, maybe. Derek Jacobi, maybe. But I think Ian McKellen would have them both covered.
I'd say so. Oh, hang on. We're forgetting someone. John Hurt.
Yeah, okay. He's
maybe
probably
a tie.
He's the only one that would, I think, have a fair fight against Ian McKellen for the biggest name in Doctor Who. And as Rob said, Rob's absolutely right. I don't know how many people noticed, but I didn't. So you've got your biggest name and no one's noticed.
Yeah, or remembered in my case.
Yeah.
Interesting one.
So the final tweet that we have is from John Arnold at @the_Arn. Well, to be blatantly obvious with parallels, Michelle Collins as a hard-bitten spaceship captain. So Michelle Collins, of course, was Captain McDonnell in 42. Apparently she also did the voice of Winnie Tyler in the Big Finish story Damaged Goods. So yeah, here John's doing a direct parallel between Michelle and Beryl Reid. Who do you think did it better?
This, for me, is another one where Michelle Collins, no idea who she is. She's just someone playing the captain. And she doesn't stand out to me as much as Beryl Reid because she's younger. And, Beryl Reid always stood out, even though I didn't know her either, because it's like, oh my God, this old woman flying the spaceship, what's going on? But here, I was like, this Captain Kath McDonnell, yeah, I believe in her. Yeah, why not? It didn't faze me at all, because I just didn't know who Michelle was.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. I thought she gave a perfectly decent performance. I must admit I haven't watched 42 probably in 6 or 7 years. I've certainly watched Earthshock more recently. But yeah, interesting nomination and an interesting parallel. So we've had some interesting thoughts there, Rob. Shall we look at some of the ones that we had on our list that didn't get nominated?
Definitely. Do you want to do stunt casting or celebrity casting?
Well, let's do the stunt and then end on the good.
Okay.
I've only got one more that hasn't been nominated by yourself or a listener, and that's Bill Bailey.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of him. Yes.
Yeah, he was Droxel in The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe. Now, never mind that episode was terrible. He was terrible. Now, Bill Bailey, I think he's one of the best comedians, performers, whatever you want to call him. He's wonderfully entertaining, very talented guy. I've seen him play dramatic roles. He was Maxie's dad in Skins, for example. But he was terrible in this. It literally felt like they'd got him for an afternoon, put a costume on him, gave him a silly prop, said, walk across the screen saying a line and then piss off.
Yeah.
Because that's the performance he gave. He walked across the stage mumbling a line that I'm sure he just read and then pissed off. It was woeful.
Yeah, I got kind of excited because I think he mentioned he was from Androzani Major. And I was like, oh, he's from Androzani Major. But apart from that, yeah, it was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. So, yeah, that's probably one of my worst because he can do so much better. And I'm sure that it's in many ways not his fault. I'm sure that it was almost pretty much as I've just guessed it was.
I've got a few more stunt casting examples. This next one, particularly in a week where you've already had an aneurysm, I'm kind of scared to say it.
Go on.
Anthony Head is the headmaster in School Reunion.
He's on my good list.
Oh no! It's a snap, but a reverse snap.
It's a reverse snap. Why is he on your bad list?
Because, okay, we're talking about waste. He's a great actor, and he's playing against type when you think of him as Giles and Buffy and all of that. But I didn't think he got to do much. I thought he was just there to stand around and sneer a bit and, have his pretties flying around and all of that nonsense. I just thought, oh, no. We could have got so much more from him. Anthony Head could be the master, for example.
No, look, I think so let's go back for a moment. We both agree that it was a big deal he was in the show, yeah?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so on that level it works. I think of his performance as being one where it needs somebody of his ability and his name because you've got the story where Liz Sladen comes back.
Okay.
And so your villain needs to be big. And I think he was big. And he was the villain that made that episode. And when I think of him in that episode, I think of the scene where he and Tennant confront each other. I think it's one of Tennant's best performances as the Doctor, as the two of them circle each other and just eye off each other and everything. I think it's a wonderful performance. And I think because he is such a big name and such a capable actor, it was needed and it was justified.
Okay, I can cop that. I think this was an interesting one though. Reverse snap, first time.
Yeah, okay. Any other bad ones you've got or stunts? Go on.
I do. More stunt casting. Kate Stewart, as played by Gemma Redgrave in multiple episodes. I think it's just a case of we've got one of the Redgraves in Doctor Who. It's Gemma Redgrave. But she's just got worse and worse and worse each time she's appeared. It's really quite... You could graph it as like just this downhill slope of her performances. It's really bizarre.
If it had just been her one debut episode, if that was all she did, would she have made your list?
She may have made the celebrity casting list.
Yeah,
not
right.
the stunt casting list.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. That's... Yeah, okay. I'm with you on that.
All right, and just quickly, some runners-up. Seb, as played by Chris Addison in Death in Heaven and Dark Water. It was just, to me, a blatant, let's get some of Capaldi's thick-of-it actors into the show, you know, and he's doing Permission to Squee? Permission to Get. Anyway, following on from that...
No, that is a very good one. The only reason he wasn't on my list is I'd erased Death in Heaven from my mind. But had I not, he would absolutely have been on my list. Yeah, that was bad.
Right. And following on from that, Rebecca Front, another thick-of-it mainstay, popped up in the Zygon Invasion as Colonel Walsh, and she just seemed awfully cast. Just did some stupid things, let all the troops get captured and killed. It was just like, yeah, she's there because she was the minister in the thick of it, and now her and Capaldi are on screen again. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Just no.
I agree with you. The only thing I'll say is I wasn't disappointed because I didn't really rate her performance in the thick of it either.
You like the first season with the other minister?
I do. Well, let's face it, you're not watching that show for the ministers, are you?
Well, no. No, that's true. You're watching it to see when Capaldi swears next.
Well, I was going to say I watched it to see how similar to my job it is, but...
Oh, good one.
What's one of your celebrity list?
On my celebrity list, okay, so I've done Richard Wilson, done Derek Jacobi. Okay, this could be a snap. I'm hoping it is, actually. Michael Gambon as Kazran Sardik in A Christmas Carol.
It's not, but I'm not going to disagree with you.
Just fantastic. I mean, it's a great episode in general, but the way he plays Kazran Sardik, just fantastic.
I'll disagree with you there, though. I think that it is an ordinary episode that is elevated to greatness because of Gambon.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think the episode's all that special. In fact, I think it's actually a little bit contrived. It works because Gambon makes it work.
Okay, so you like the more serious scenes where they're back in the house with him and he's looking at the old pictures and stuff like that, more so than when they're flitting around and the Doctor's marrying Marilyn Monroe and things like this.
Oh, absolutely. But I also don't think those scenes would have worked with a lesser actor.
Okay. No, that's very fair.
So I've only got one more now that we've had Jacobi, Wilson, Nye and Stuart Head. I'm going to mention Thomas Sangster.
I thought you might.
Who was Tim Latimer in Human Nature.
Yeah, now he's popped up in a lot of things for someone so young.
He was the young boy in Love Actually. He was in a number of other movies as a kid actor. He's been in Game of Thrones, I believe. One of my favourite roles that he was in was he played the young Paul McCartney in the movie about John Lennon's young life called Nowhere Boy. And he was wonderful in that. He's now in the Maze Runner films. He was in The Force Awakens for about 8 seconds.
And he still looks about 14 years old, even though he's now 38.
Yeah, look, he does, but he's quite for a young actor. He's very, very well known, and certainly he's one of those child actors most people would know. I think if you're going to have an episode that really hinges around the performance of your lead child actor, which Human Nature does, if you can get the kid from Love Actually, not only is it a great moment of wow, it's the kid from Love Actually, Sangster gives a really good performance, and Human Nature remains after 10 seasons my favourite episode of New Doctor Who, and part of that is off the back of his performance as the lead when he was still quite young.
Do you know the only bit of that episode that makes me wince is when they're in the trenches of World War I at the end and he still looks really, 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 really young. And maybe that's to make the point that, some boys marched off to war young, but he just looks a wee bit too young. It just doesn't look quite right. Yeah,
I get what they're going for, that thing about, the youth and the helmets are too big and the jackets are too big and they are boys. But you're right, it just grated a little bit. It's not as bad as the epilogue to the last Harry Potter film that had Harry's girlfriend in the Julia Gillard wig and everything. That was terrible.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that didn't quite work. What have we missed from your list, Rob?
Okay, another one I have here is David Walliams as Gibbous in The God Complex.
Don't you see? He'll lead it right here.
What do you suggest?
Look, whatever it is out there, it's obviously chosen Howard as its next course. Now, and tragic though that is, this is no time for sentiment. I'm saying if it were to find him, it may be satisfied and let the rest of us go.
Now, this to me is absolutely celebrity casting. I mean, David Walliams, hot as hell at the time for Little Britain, and they put him in, funny makeup, and he's in this episode. I thought it could be a complete disaster, and I actually really liked him in it. Just the cowardly sort of character he played there. I thought he did a really, really good job, so I couldn't call it stunt casting, definitely celebrity casting for me.
Okay, I can't really comment. I don't remember that episode, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's one of my favourite Matt Smith episodes.
No, that's from the period when I'd given up on Doctor Who, and I did go back and watch them all sort of one a month for a while to get through the season, but I'd given up on Doctor Who at that stage, I'm sorry.
Wow. Okay. And now a couple of quick runners-up. First of all, Diana Rigg as Mrs. Gillyflower in The Crimson Horror.
Yeah, I thought you might mention her.
I mean, does it get much bigger than Dame Diana Rigg?
No, it definitely doesn't. I'm a big fan of her. I thought she did give a good performance in there. I must admit, there's another Victorian senator who I work with who looks very much like Diana Rigg, and I have to resist the temptation every time I see her walking around Parliament not to say, Mrs. Peel, we're needed.
That would be awesome. Now, we mentioned Sir John Hurt earlier, and I'm not going to choose him here, but I am going to choose another Doctor. I'm going to say Tom Baker as the caretaker in Day of the Doctor.
Oh, deep cuts there, Rob. Deep cuts.
Why, Dave? Why?
Well, it wouldn't even have occurred to me to say Tom Baker, but I think you've just won the game.
Yes!
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting call. And look, you're absolutely right. He was cast for the only reason that he was Tom Baker, to make us all go, wow, that's Tom Baker on screen. And we all shed a tear and said, wow, that's Tom Baker on screen.
Yeah, so definitely celebrity casting and not stunt casting.
Definitely. I'm glad we ended on that note. That's a good call.
Thank you. Yeah, it came to me today. I mean, we've been thinking about this for a few weeks now. It hadn't occurred to me. And then just when I was making the list today, I thought, oh, hang on, I wonder if Dave's got this.
No, that was good. I like that. So any final thoughts to wrap up this segment, Rob?
Yeah, look, I'm just briefly looking at my list, and there seems to be an awful lot of stunt casting or celebrity casting during the RTD era. That's not to say there isn't during the Moffat era as well, but I'm just wondering whether of the two guys, RTD isn't a bit more JNT, perhaps. Yeah,
I think that is the case, although both producers have certainly done it, but I think Russell T Davies revelled in it a lot more. One thing that I've taken out of it, just looking over our list and our discussion, is it's not a perfect fit, but where we've talked about them being celebrity casting, they tend to be people with a long body of work who are recognised for a great deal of stuff. The stunt casting tends to be, and you used the phrase earlier, someone who's really hot in that moment, but maybe doesn't have the wherewithal or the, dare I say, gravitas to back it all up.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's a very interesting thing. I think we could dig into a bit more perhaps in the future. If our listeners have got any thoughts on this as a whole, not so much your picks, but as a concept, why not write in and let us know your thoughts as well?
Yeah, and overall, is New Who as guilty of it as Classic Who? Is it better or worse?
I think it's worse. Because I don't think it was much of a thing in Classic Who until the JNT era. There obviously were guest actors, of course there were, but not to the degree or the celebrity I think that JNT was pulling in.
And I think it's partly because modern filming techniques both try and sport the way they can film little bits here and there, and contracts can be much more varied, does allow for a bigger name just to come in and do a couple of scenes or just do a day. Which really, there wasn't the flexibility to do that so much back in the day.
Oh, exactly right. And I'm thinking, because I've been listening to an episode of The Complete Menagerie. I like it! where they're talking about the Sylvester McCoy era, and they mentioned Dolores Gray, who was roped into Silver Nemesis because JNT wanted Dolores Gray in Silver Nemesis. And to this day, like the guys on Complete Menagerie, I have no idea who Dolores Gray is or why she's famous.
The only reason I know who she is because I've read making of stuff about Silver Nemesis.
Oh, okay. Who is she, Dave?
Oh, she was a big luminaire of Broadway and the US old style screen or something. Yeah, she was a big sort of show tunes kind of actress. You know, from the golden era more than the modern era. I think she'd well past her peak of her celebrity by 1988.
Right, I've just pulled up the TARDIS data core while we're talking, and it says Dolores Gray played Mrs. Remington in the Doctor Who television story Silver Nemesis. Yes, we know this. This was her last televised role.
Well, there you go.
That says a lot about JNT's picks right there, I think.
I think so.
Okay, shall we put a lid on that?
I think so. I think we've covered that thoroughly.